Welcome back to the Photography Show TV studio, where I am joined by Daniel Berehulak, who's been talking about some powerful and lasting images to the audiences here in the Super Stage. Now, native Australian, started off taking photographs, sports photography.
Sports photography, yep.
And then at some point you started seeing the worst things happening in the world, anywhere in the world, and chasing after them. How did that change come about?
The change came about. I played sport during university, and during university I had no idea what I wanted to do. I was studying a history degree. I was working in retail, selling children's wear and strollers, and one thing I knew I wanted to do was see the world. And I grew up on a farm. I didn't think, my parents were refugees of the Second World War. I just didn't think that was something for me. I didn't think that was something that was possible. That was a job for someone else, and they wanted me to be something respectable and responsible, like a dentist or a doctor. So my sister passed away, actually, at a young age, and that left an impression on me. And I quit the job where I was, and I'd been doing photography, and with her, with Anna, I talked about my dreams as a kid and doing something creative. I knew I wanted to travel the world, and I started photographing. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I knew I wanted to do it. So I started working for a man because I played sport, photographing sport on weekends.
Tell the stories that you know. It's the same whether you're a writer and I guess as a photographer as well. If sport's already there inside you, then telling its story is quite natural.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I got a break. I started working as a freelancer in Sydney, and at some point I just felt that working as a sports photographer, that I wasn't, I think, able to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. Okay. In 1999, I came across a World Press Photo exhibit in Vienna that really left a lasting impression on me. There were so many things that were happening around the world that I didn't know about. And in a way, it was a consciousness that developed over a piece of time, but it was something that from a sport career led to an interest in news and current affairs and finding out what was happening in the world. I got offered a job for Getty Images in London, and worked in London for 2005 to 2009, doing mostly politics.
Right.
And Christie's photo calls. But I just still felt that I wanted to see more of the world and to experience how people were living, but also to tell stories that I felt were being underreported.
So that takes us up to about 10 years ago now, broadly.
10 years ago now. And I remember covering the Pakistan floods, and I felt like I was out in the field. I was working up and down the country, and producing powerful images and telling the story of these people and what was happening. That year, the photos won World Press Photo, and one of the editors asked me, "So tell me about the image of the man and the boy." And I felt so guilty and shame that I didn't know the story behind the people in my photographs. That afternoon, we were out in a place where we didn't have a translator with us, but filled with guilt. I wanted to make it right. And I went back a year later, and I'd done GPS coordinates, and showing the photographs from the year before, I was able to track down the people in my photographs, and I was able to do a before photo and then an after photo. I interviewed, I wrote down their stories. I kind of wanted to make right, and I learned that it's one thing to be a photographer and come back with powerful photographs, but what I realized was, to become a better photographer, I needed to become a better journalist.
Yes.
So that year, I worked for a few more years and decided to go freelance to be able to work on more long-term projects. And that's when I started working with the New York Times and working with amazing reporters and going out to various places. Their first opportunity they gave me was in Afghanistan for 3 months, working with the journalists there.
Right. And another opportunity for the New York Times, I think it was the work that you did that's been very well documented over in the Philippines and the so-called war on drugs there.
Yes.
The amount of death that you covered, how affected were you by that? I mean, obviously you're documenting. You've already expressed a need, a responsibility to understand the stories behind these people whose lives and deaths you're capturing.
Yep.
How do you find your ability to separate yourself emotionally from those when you're seeing so much of this?
It's tough. It's really, really hard. What I try to remind myself is that I'm not a medic, I'm not a doctor, I'm not an NGO worker, and that my role there is to tell stories. And if I'm not there and if I'm not photographing during these moments, and this is what helps me kind of try to maintain my composure when I'm there, because it's awful. It's people in the worst time in their lives experiencing the most awful, losing their loved ones. And what I try to remind myself is that these people have a right to have their stories told.
Yeah, yeah. You're in Mexico City now, still working as a freelance photojournalist, telling some news stories. Anything you're allowed to share about projects that you're working on next? Anything you have?
At the moment, I'm recalibrating and finding some downtime, because these projects actually do take a lot out of you.
I can understand that.
So. Yeah, that's it for the moment.
Well, listen, Daniel, thank you very much for stopping by in the studio here. Utmost respect for your work and the stories that you are able to tell. And thank you for sharing those with us here today at the Photography Show.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Cheers.